Hello and welcome back, I'm Sean, and today we're comparing two phones, the POCO X7 and the Redmi Note 14 Pro, both at very similar price point but with wildly different performances, to see which one is better. So let's check it out. So let's start off with the similarities of this phone. So starting with the charging capabilities of these phones, good news is both of these phones comes with a 45 watts turbo fast charging, and both POCO and Redmi is nice enough to include the charging brick in the box itself. So both of these phones also comes with screen protectors pre-applied to the phones, as well as a silicone case together with the phone, so out of the box your precious new phone is protected. So both of these phones also run the same LPDDR4X RAM and UFS 2.2 storage architecture, and both of these phones runs Corning Gorilla's Glass Victus 2 and have 120Hz eye care display. So camera wise, you're going to get the same 8MP ultra wide lens as well as a 2MP macro lens, and with that said, that's all of the same things that you get with both of this phone. So now let's talk about the differences between these phones. So the first area that is different is of course the camera itself. So with the Redmi, you're getting a 200MP f1.65 Pro grade camera with the Redmi with a sensor size of 1/1.4 inch, and with the POCO you're getting a 50MP f1.5, and the POCO also comes with a Sony IMX882 sensor, which is a 1/1.95 inch sensor. So from a camera sensor standpoint, the Redmi 14 Pro still has the much larger sensor. So a few more features that is different that I really love is the POCO allows video recording up to 4K 30 frames per second, which is awesome, and the Redmi only comes in at 1080p but 60 frames per second. And on top of that, now with the POCO, you're going to get YouTube playback at 4K 2160 with HDR support, and only up to 1440p no HDR on the Redmi. So you also get a smaller 5110 mAh battery on the POCO versus the 5500 mAh battery on the Redmi, but this is very surprising and we'll talk about the battery performance shortly. So one key thing to take note about the POCO X7 is that it doesn't have any storage expansion with microSD, but comes with a RAM extension up to 16GB or 24GB based on the model that you get. So you also get a sharper and brighter screen on the POCO with even higher color bitrate and also a much better water resistant rating at IP68 versus the IP64 on the Redmi. Finally, at least for the model that I have here in Malaysia, the Redmi Note 14 Pro, the non-5G version versus the POCO X7 that comes with 5G. Of course, in other markets, there is also Note 14 Pro 5G, so that's worth noting. And also, two more differences with these phones is that the POCO runs Bluetooth 5.4 and the Redmi only Bluetooth 5.3, and although there is high-res audio support on the POCO, there isn't any 3.5mm headphones jack found here. So with that said, both of these phones are priced very similarly, so it's a very good comparison between the two. And the POCO X7 comes in at 1,199 Malaysia ringgit, and the Redmi now comes in at 1,100 ringgit. And if you find value in what you hear and like what you see, do subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so the YouTube algorithm can pick this up. And if you want to buy any of these phones, do check out my links below. So when it comes to display, having a full HD screen is nice, but having a 1.5K screen is even better. And although both of these phones have the same size 6.67 inch AMOLED display, both have 120Hz refresh rate, the POCO here has a higher resolution of 2712 by 1220, making it a 1.5K screen versus the Redmi at only 2400 by 1080. The POCO also gets brighter with its peak brightness at 3000 nits versus the peak brightness of 1800 nits on the Redmi, which makes HDR content pop especially nice with the POCO. And in normal day-to-day use with high brightness mode, the POCO goes upwards of 1200 nits, making it easy to read even under strong sunlight. So in terms of color, the POCO also comes with a more beautiful 12-bit screen versus a 10-bit screen on the Redmi. And to be honest, a 10-bit screen is already really nice, but a 12-bit screen does give you a much more dynamic color rendition. And for my day-to-day test, it feels softer, more pleasing and gentler to the eyes. Both of these phones runs DCI-P3 wide color gamut, so they are both very accurate color displays. And again, with the Redmi, you get a cooler screen tone and the POCO has a warmer tone to it. So this is mainly preference, but I much prefer a warmer tone on the screen rather than a cooler screen. And also good news here is that both of these phones runs the Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2, so definitely strong enough to withstand most of your day-to-day abuse. Okay, so battery life is where I'm quite surprised with the performance, and although the Redmi has a significantly larger battery at 5500 mAh, for my battery test running YouTube at maximum resolution and maximum brightness, the Redmi Note Note 14 Pro lasted exactly 12 hours. But when I was testing the POCO, I was really surprised because it comes with a smaller 5110 mAh battery, but I believe it's a lot more optimized, I guess. It dropped about 5 to 6% battery per hour in the same circumstances, and at the 5-hour mark with the continuous playback, the battery dropped to 66%, which is very similar to the Redmi, but where this phone shines is later in the battery life range. So at the 11-hour mark, the POCO has about 30% battery life, where the Redmi dropped to about 23%, and at the 12-hour mark, the Redmi died. So the POCO at the 13-hour mark still has 16% battery left, and by the 14.5-hour mark dropped to 7%. So during my test filming, the phone dropped to 1% battery at 10:57 AM in the morning, and that 1% battery lasted all the way to 11:21 AM before it died. So all in all, the POCO X7 with the smaller battery lasted 15 hours and 51 minutes, where the Redmi died at 12 hours. So the good news is both of these phones comes with a good 45 watts fast charging, and you also get the brick inside the box itself, so that's very nice. Both of these phones runs mid-range chipset, but do note that there may be different versions of these phones in different regions that might run different chipsets, so do take note of that. And the Redmi that I have here runs the MediaTek Helio G100 Ultra, which is an octa-core chipset running at a max 2.2 GHz, where the POCO X7 runs the MediaTek Dimensity 7300 Ultra, also an octa-core chipset but in a 4nm architecture running at a clock speed of 2.5 GHz. So as mentioned earlier, both of these phones runs the LPDDR4X RAM architecture and also the UFS 2.2 storage, but only the Redmi comes with expandable microSD card support up to 1TB. Separately, the POCO comes in two different variants, an 8GB RAM model with 256GB of storage and also a 12GB model with 512GB storage. The good thing about the POCO is that this chipset allows flexible RAM expansion up to 16GB and 24GB respectively, so you're going to get to extract a little bit more performance for RAM-hungry games or applications, making it smoother and nicer experience overall. So with the better chipset on the POCO, you also get a much more enjoyable experience using apps like YouTube, because now you are able to watch movies up to 2160 at 4K resolution with HDR. So that's very awesome. You don't need to be stuck with the Redmi at only 1440p and no HDR. So the good news is playing games like PUBG on both of these phones feels smooth and nice. However, with the POCO, I am able to run PUBG upwards of the HDR graphics and in the ultra frame rate, so making the overall look and feel of the game much better than the Redmi. Only thing that I wish is that the frame rate could be faster and higher with this phone since it's running a 120Hz screen. So the design of the X7 is very nice, and at the front here you're gonna get a standard display, 6.67-inch Crystal Res AMOLED display. You get a selfie camera at the top here, as well as an in-screen fingerprint sensor at the bottom. So the sides of the X7 is all chrome and it's quite a fingerprint magnet, and on the right side is a power button as well as a volume rocker, and at the top here you're gonna get a speaker unit as well as a IR blaster. So on the left side there's nothing here, and at the bottom you're gonna get a Type-C port to charge up the phone, a SIM card tray as well as another speaker. So at the back here you're gonna get two types of option with the X7, a plastic model or vegan leather version that I have here, which I think looks really good, and at the top is a 3-camera setup with a LED flash. So just take note, if you get the plastic model, it weighs in at 185.5 grams, and the leather version that we have here comes in at 190 grams. As for the Redmi, you get an identical front with the same size screen, AMOLED display as well with the selfie camera cutout, as well as an in-screen fingerprint sensor here. All the sides and corners are all exactly the same, except that the Redmi comes with a 3.5mm headphone jack. And the back of the phone is mainly made out of plastic, and there is also a 3-camera setup with a LED flash at the back. So from a design standpoint, both of these phones are quite similar, and the Redmi weighs in at only 180 grams. So in a nutshell, I think both of these phones has very identical performance when it comes to the camera, and if you don't pixel peep, both of these phones provides you very pleasing photo outputs that you can be proud of. So when it comes to the standard camera lens, both of these camera performs well, and in challenging situations, I don't see both of these phones having any visible chromatic aberration, which means their lens structure is very well made. This isn't the same when we looked at the Note 14 5G. When it comes to easier HDR scenarios, the POCO does well and produces a very pleasing photo, exposing foreground and sky very well, but composing the image a little bit differently means you're gonna get an overly exposed foreground with a blown out sky. So when it comes to comparing between the 50 megapixel and the 200 megapixel shot, the winner is clearly the Redmi with more resolution and larger sensor, and again this only matters if you pixel peep or want to crop in your photos in pose. And one thing to note is that when you're in full megapixel mode, HDR turns off and you get less flattering photo of the lighting in challenging situations. Other cameras are also identical on both of these phones, and I suspect you won't look too much into the details of these lenses as well. And the ultra-wide lens on both of these cameras are 0.6x zooms, so they look good, but as to all ultra-wide cameras, you lose out in the details when zooming in. So there is no dedicated telephoto lens, so the 2x lens here is actually just a cropped in version of the main camera lens. So the front selfie camera of the 32 megapixel Redmi is visibly smoother and higher quality as compared to the 20 megapixel POCO, but from a day-to-day use, both work great with no fuss under good lighting situations, but in dimly lit situations, I wouldn't rely much on the front camera. Macro shots on both of these phones looks pretty much the same. Both aren't high quality thanks to the small 2 megapixel lens, but if you're in a pinch and really need that macro shot, then at least you got it. And finally, the biggest upgrade with the POCO is that you get to shoot video with a crisp 4K 30 frames per second, giving you a beautiful and high resolution video output. And the downside of the Redmi is that the chipset limits it to 1080p at 60 frames per second. So if you're more of a videographer, then you know which phone you need to get. And in terms of sound quality, I think the POCO slightly takes the edge as compared to the Redmi, and audio sounds slightly more dynamic and warm as compared to the colder, more metallic signature on the Redmi. So volume-wise, I think both of them are equally loud with their dual speaker setup, and Dolby Atmos support also means it's cleaner and less distortion. So one thing to note here is that the POCO comes with the newer Bluetooth 5.4 support and the Redmi only comes with Bluetooth 5.3. With that said, both of these phones supports LDAC. However, the Redmi comes also supported with aptX HD, and the POCO is mainly LDAC and LHDC. Funny, I also noticed that POCO puts on its box that it has high-res audio support but not high-res audio wireless support, because the POCO doesn't come with any 3.5mm audio jack for you to use with your high-res audio headphones. So all in all, I think both of these are good mid-range phones, where I am swaying more towards the POCO, as in my opinion I think it's a much more capable phone than the Redmi, especially at this price point. So what do you think? Which of these phones will you buy if you're in the market for a mid-range smartphone? Let me know. So I've also recently compared the Redmi Note 14 Pro against its younger brother, the Redmi Note 14 5G. And if you're interested in how big a difference it is between the two phones, then you need to check out this video right over here, and I'll see you over at that video.